In today's video, we're going to go over some really nice, high profit vintage items, one-of-a-kind things that you can find anywhere. Yeah, anywhere. Let's get to learning. The first item I want to talk to you about is picture frames, or photo frames, or picture photo frames. However you say it, these can be so profitable. There are a few tips. Not all picture frames sell for a great price. Here are my tips. Look for picture frames that are old. Kelly, how do I know if it's old? Well, the biggest indicator is going to be on the back side. Wire loops, old tacks and nails, wood that looks as old as it is, something that's been crafted by hand versus factory, something that's not perfectly mitered maybe. Now let's talk about the front of the picture frame. There should be some really beautiful details. Gold tone, wood inlay, bone. How do I know if it's bone? Good question. You're going to have to do a Google search because some resin and some stone can look like bone. A common bone that is used in picture frames, believe it or not, is camel bone. And I haven't done much research on it, but when you pick something up, don't be surprised. I recently sold this one on eBay for $125 plus shipping. Notice the size, it's a 13 by 21. Who's buying 13 by 21? Some guy in New York. Thank you, Mark. I listed this frame on August 1st and it sold on September 25th. So just under 2 months for a high ticket item is great in my book. There was some questionable art in this frame, so I simply removed it and photographed it. Now it didn't hurt that it had a linen mat, and it didn't hurt that it was highly detailed. Ornate is a keyword I want you to use whenever you find a picture frame that's fancy like that. Things to look for when you're sourcing picture frames are condition somewhat. I've sold picture frames that were nearly falling apart because of their age, and they still sold for great money. Another thing to look for would be gilding, which I spelled wrong in my listing, as you can see here. It should have been G-I-L-T. It's gilt with gold. Those are very popular. And anytime you see carved or raised details on a picture frame, you're going to want to look closer. Those are so popular, and I've sold a bunch of them for really good money, even smaller sizes. Shipping picture frames can be tricky if the glass is enclosed, and I will put out a video shortly on how I do that, so stay tuned for that. Next up, let's talk about vintage bath towels. I live in a house full of men, and they're just not appreciated here. I tried to hang on to these, and I had one good bath towel and one washcloth left, so I sold them together. As you can see here, they are a beautiful set, really colorful with a ton of texture. This set of one bath towel and one washcloth sold for $29.87 on eBay. After fees, basically profit for me. I listed them on the 22nd of September and they sold just 2 days later. What you want to look for with vintage bath towels, of course, are condition. Anything that's too stained or torn is not going to sell well. The next thing you want to look for is color and pattern. Vintage bath towels fit a very romantic cottagecore type of theme. So any kind of pastel colors, floral details, things like that should do very well for you. So keep your eye on the towel section at the thrift, but my favorite place to get them is at garage sales where you can pick them up for $1 or inherit some like I did. Next up, I want to talk to you about vintage office supplies, specifically address books. I know, it doesn't seem like anyone uses them anymore, but they do. You want to look for materials. You want to look for leather bound. You want to look for really sturdy binding. You want to look for clean, unused inserts. When sourcing vintage address books, I would say that anything really kitschy or really high quality, like in this case, I'd never heard of this brand before, Mark Cross. Now this might be related to Cross pens. I can't be sure. I didn't do that much of a dive on it. But this address book ends up being a black leather 6-ring unused address book. Now, I didn't even notice the maker's mark until I got home because as you can see here, it's so tiny and it doesn't say leather anywhere. So until I got it home and did more research, I just thought it was an address book in really good condition. And that was enough for me to pick it up at $3.99. It ended up selling in one day for $50. Now, I suspect that had a lot in this case to do with the brand, but I have in the past sold leather address books or really kitschy address books for prices from $25 to $60. So keep your eyes peeled. Okay, let's talk about chalkware, which is made out of chalk. You're right. You've seen these statues in people's homes, at garage sales, in the thrift store, and you're thinking, who wants that? Well, they're very collectible. And even if they're a little chippy, they're still very desired. Specifically, the religious statues, such as this one here, Jesus. Mother Mary is also very popular, as are the saints. Now you want to make sure there's no limbs missing. But even if the nose is a little bit dinged or one of the hands, you should still be in pretty good shape if the color is somewhat intact and the piece itself is in good condition overall. These are really heavy too, so shipping is something that you have to account for. But having said that, I sold this statue of Jesus at 13 inches for $42.50. Now it did take 2.5 months to sell, but that's nothing for something so highly vintage and special. I inherited this from Uncle Reuben, who you will hear about often, because when Uncle Reuben passed away, I inherited quite a few vintage objects, and they've been selling really wonderfully for me. Okay, let's talk about bucket hats. Bucket hats are popular all the time, anywhere. They're a unisex hat. Young kids like them, older folks like them. They're just a great pickup in general, but when they're vintage, they're perfection. I wouldn't even say you need to find them in specific colors, although I will say neutral colors probably cast a wider net in terms of who's going to wear them. Older people are probably not going to wear flashy colors, unless you're my grandma. She used to wear them. You want to look at the labels on these hats to figure out whether or not they're vintage. And we could go into this, but I think most of us, when we see a vintage label, we just know, right? Okay, so this was an Eddie Bauer hat in a khaki tan, and it sold for $30 on the same day I listed it. I paid $4 at the thrift. The great thing about these is they're so light, so packable, so easy to ship. Keep your eyes open for bucket hats. Let's talk about sweaters. I talked a little bit about sweaters in my last video when we were looking at that blue cardigan with the little heart buttons. But this time I want to talk about sweaters that skew more toward the unisex. And they have a really wide audience of lovers because of the whole grandma-grandpa thing. So, cardigans, any sweater with an opening that zips or buttons shut, is a great call. People love to be able to take them off easily. That's not to say pullovers or pull-ons aren't also popular, especially with that thick cable knit fisherman aesthetic. What you want to look for with sweaters always is materials. Acrylic can be itchy, so can wool, but there are some brands that do a beautiful job of even those materials, and you need to feel them to know. You want to look for condition because moth holes and tears are terrible things to find once you've gotten them home and you're starting to photograph. So look them over really well wherever you're sourcing them. Big, boxy, oversized sweaters are popular with men and women, teenagers and adults. Even better if they have pockets. I've got a little story about this sweater. This is a Brooks Brothers, which is a great brand. And importantly, it's a camel hair sweater. Now, camel hair is right up there with cashmere, only it's even more hard to find. This was a great size, an extra large, and it opened in the front, so it was a cardigan. The only problem is it had stains, and I didn't see them till I got home. So when I tell you to look them over, I mean it. I ended up taking this to the dry cleaners, deciding it was worth it. $15 later, I decided it may not have been worth it. I did get my money back on this sale, but I didn't make anywhere close to what I thought I was going to. This sweater sold for $49.50 on eBay. I was all into it for $25. I listed it in November of 2024, and it just sold last month. So this took quite a while, and I suspect it's because the dry cleaners could not get all the stains out either. Bummer. Having said all that, it was still not a bad pickup. And I definitely trained my eye to look for camel hair, something I'd never found before. Keep your eyes open. Maxi skirts. Oh my goodness. One of my favorite things to sell. I'll tell you why, because they come in all shapes and styles. Women love them. So this maxi skirt is a brand I've never heard of before, and it didn't matter. What did matter is that it had lots of great details. It's tiered, it's asymmetrical, it's a soft chambray, it's very full, and it's got this interesting wash. It's a size large, which is great, and I was able to tack on some great keywords like Western and festival. I paid $10 for this skirt at the thrift and sold it for $50 on eBay. I listed it on the 20th of August and it sold 6 days later. What to look for? I'm going to say condition first always with clothing. You don't want anything with rips or tears unless you're selling a whole other category of clothes, which I'll go into in another video. In this case, details matter a lot. Like I said, I've got tiers, I've got asymmetrical, I've got the fact that it's not just denim, it's chambray, which is a softer wash of denim. Let's get boring for just a minute and talk about belts. Do people still wear belts? Yes, they do. And if they're leather, even better. If they're vintage, better yet. This Polo Ralph Lauren belt is a 42 men's and it sold for $30 on eBay. I paid $6 and it sold in just 4 days. Even this belt had a flaw, which I showed in the last picture. I want to talk about material. I have sold woven belts. I have sold highly decorated belts with lots of hardware and sequins and beading. But if you only stuck to leather belts, you would do just fine, my friend. Even brand doesn't really matter as long as the quality of leather is good, it's in good condition. And one other tip is if the buckle is gold, turn it over to see if you see the word brass. As is the case with this belt, the buckle's brass and people love those details. So that always helps with this sale. Keep that in mind. Let's talk my favorite, dresses, vintage dresses. Vintage dresses with lots of detail, even if they're missing the size tag like I am on this one. Let's take a look. Vintage Pointel knit peplum dress, size small, flutter sleeves, rope tie, powder blue. Let me tell you something. This sold for $50 on eBay. I paid $10, which felt like a lot at the time. I actually bought this from the owner of an estate sale company. She was selling her personal goods and you know they were good. I listed this on June 14th and it sold on August 9th. So in under 2 months it sold, which again, considering it had no size tag, was wonderful. What you want to look for with vintage dresses always is condition as usual, and then details and age. I've seen a lot of people put non-vintage dresses on sale and call them vintage when in fact you can tell by the details they're modern. Pointel just means it's got sort of the little holes dotted throughout. It's the way it's woven. You can find shirts that are made this way, as well as sweaters and dresses. So that was a really special detail that I was sure to include in the title. I've sold so many vintage dresses that are so unique and brought such a great price. A lot of times vintage dresses get overlooked, especially if they're missing a size tag because shoppers don't want to deal with it. So if you see a dress that looks just different enough and piques your interest, pull it out, get a good look at it. When it comes to vintage dresses, even if the size tag is there, I still want you to take lots of great measurements. And I'll tell you why. Vintage tags are not the same as modern tags, and women don't always know that. When measuring, I tend to do armpit to armpit for the bust. I'll do the waist across. I will do shoulder to hem. I will do sleeve length. And in some cases, I will go shoulder to waist, waist to hem. That way, if someone has a longer bodice than another, she'll know where it's going to hit on her body. So I think those measurements are super important when it comes to selling vintage dresses. This last item has a little story attached to it. This is a needlepoint. It's a finished piece and it is framed, but you'll notice right away something's missing. The glass cover. I bought this in a little thrift store where my stepmom volunteers, and I saw it and loved it and picked it up, and immediately the glass cover fell straight out of the frame. And like a dummy, I tried to catch it with my leg, which I did successfully. I still have the scar to prove it. The women in the shop decided to give it to me for free after they bandaged me up. So sweet. Anyway, I ended up walking out of there with it for free. I sold it on eBay for $50. I listed it on June 12th. It sold on August 5th, less than 2 months. When shopping for needlepoint, I want you to keep in mind 3 things. Number 1, I want you to keep in mind skill level. I've seen many needlepoints that were cute-ish, but the skill set just wasn't there. The number 2 thing I want you to think about is the subject, because not everyone wants a needlepoint of just anything. In this case, I thought all the music instruments with all the fruit lent itself so well to a traditional music room, and I even put that in my description box. I loved all the colors. It was well done. And condition, even in this piece, there were some threads missing, and I take a close-up of that. I put it right here in the listing. If it's a small area that's damaged, I've noticed that doesn't matter. But I do warn you, if you find a piece that's soiled at all, number 1, they don't tend to sell well. And number 2, if you try to clean them, you can make them much worse. I've done it, and I could kick myself for it. So keep your eyes open for needlepoints, with or without a frame, with or without the glass. Look for skill, look for subject, look for colors and condition, and I'm telling you, you will find a great return on your money if you get a good deal especially. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you got some good tips out of today's video. Next week, I'm going to show you how I ship highly breakable items. It's going to be a great one. Until then, love bugs, just remember, God provides and we flip it forward. Enjoy your week. Hello. Hello, hello. Are we not? I'm Kelly. I've been reselling for 7 years part-time, and I'm losing my breath already, and I just started.